Hey guys, Bobby Bollinger here, and before I get into anything, I just want to say I loved Survivors. I still do. It's an awesome story, does a great job, and every book, except maybe the first one, was great. Even this one, I loved this book. So when I talk about the lost potential in Survivors, yes, it's kind of a criticism, but it's also kind of a dream of what what could have been and I'm not really angry at the writers, maybe a little disappointed, but I can understand why you would stop writing a series. I get that the love for writing something can just be gone at one point, and from there it's just an obligation. And when it's an obligation to make something, you end up with book 3 and 4 of the second Seeker series, which were not good. So I can understand that if it was an obligation to keep writing this, stop writing this. And I also get that Survivors here was not the most popular of series. It was not Warriors. Now, that's probably because of the first book, because the rest were freaking awesome. But I get it. I understand. Not mad, but. And I can't help but dream of what we could have had from this. Survivors. As a series, it's a lot like Warriors in that there's never really a good time to stop. There's always some bloodline to follow, some story that's interesting. And they're never gonna just come together at one point and just be like, everything's done. The end of the series has to come eventually, and it was always going to leave us with, well, what about this? There was always going to be that. It's just that this one left a ton of, well, what about that? First off, the epilogue in this story, it skipped over an entire third series in itself, I'm pretty sure, because there was so many interesting things that could have been there. Lucky's getting old. Whose perspective this thing would follow? A lot of people say the pups. I think you could have switched back to Lucky's. Maybe, kept with Storm's. I don't know who you'd have followed. But you had some options, even if it is retreading what you already did, because that could be fairly interesting. But what I mean by an entire third series is just the wolves of that area. The book says, and they got here, they made a pact with the wolves, and everything was cool with them. No. There is more to that story. There is a lot more to that story. You read the 5th book of this, and, even if you don't notice the subtle hints that show how this could have been really good as a story, you know that alpha would not be like, oh yeah, well, we can share with you guys. Come on in. No. There would have been quite the arguments, quite the politics. It would have made for an interesting series, I guess, but man, when you do know those subtle hints about that alpha, for those of you who haven't read, I think it's Alpha's Tale, it's Alpha's mini story. Spoilers up ahead, spoilers for this whole video, I guess, but run of the mill. In the fifth book of The Gathering Darkness. The alpha, she's described, she's kind of old, yada yada. She's got this scar running down her foreleg. Wait, what? A scar running down her foreleg? That's exactly what Alpha had. And he only got it from those specific fierce dogs in that specific garden. And, the only other wolf we know that has been caught by those guys was Alpha's mom. And they said they killed her. But there is a wolf with their signature scar on its leg. This cannot be unrelated. It's just too interesting to throw away. They threw away Calamity too, and that was really disappointing because it's her meeting up with the dogs who killed her mate, not knowing that, and eventually finding out, the lead up to that and the aftermath of that, whatever it might be. There was so much potential there, and I understand that, everyone coming back is not realistic, but the Survivor series, if you didn't notice reading it through, pretty much nobody is gone until they're dead. And even then, there are some exceptions. Isn't that right, Tufty? So, when we see a character that could have so much potential and just never comes back, it's where'd you go? What happened to you? Old Hunter, there was nothing to do with that story, and it still seemed kind of odd to me that with the way Survivors went, he never came back. It was odd, but he was not important. There wasn't really much story to go there. Lucky losing his old mentor was about as far as it could go. And yeah, they've brought characters back for less wine, but it wouldn't have been much. And you think Calamity herself would have been interesting? How about Alpha's mom? That, Calamity, yes, she's interesting because of her relationship with Alpha. That's a big deal. But Alpha's mom is interesting because, yeah, she has a relationship to Alpha as well. Not as strong as Calamity's, but she's got to juggle that with being the alpha of her pack. That has more to it than Calamity does. If they both come back, I don't know how things would go. It would be insane. But Alpha's mom, on her own, could have carried a third series. I have no doubts about that. Would she react violently, depressed, giving up, moving on, accepting? I don't know. And what even is her backstory? She was kind of low on that totem pole, got scarred, probably kicked out of her pack. How the heck did she become an alpha of a wolf pack? Because that competition, it's a bit more fierce than what the dogs have going on. Yeah, they battle, but intellect always seems to win out in that. Wolves, we don't know for sure, but the indicator is that, yeah, the strength plays a pretty big part, bigger than what the dogs have going on. So the wolf part that we just completely skipped over, oh, that's painful. And I forgot probably the best one, thoughtful and peaceful. Those were characters that are not just one books and they're done. You don't just have them one book and just leave it lie like that. And I've heard from quite a few places that it's Thoughtful times storm, thoughtful times storm. And I'm like, I can't be on it yet because there's nothing in writing to make me say, yes, they're good together yet. But from what we have, yeah, if anyone's going to go with Storm, it is thoughtful. And I think part of that might be like the old saying, girls grow up to marry their fathers, and what that means is not its literal meaning. Don't worry, girls are not growing up to literally marry their fathers. They're growing up to marry guys that are like their fathers. And in Storm's case, closest things he would have to a father is Lucky, though Lucky clearly treats his pups differently than how he treated Storm. Even though we don't follow that too closely, we can tell. And thoughtful is Lucky. Like you could probably have told a little bit into that story, like maybe right off the bat, but what really sank it in for me is when she goes to them for help, and he's not actually there. He sees her, realizes, oh crap, I can't have her notice me or make any indication that she knows who I am. So he's out there just hiding in the tree lines, waiting for everyone to leave. And I'm like, that's Lucky, the guy who wants to help, but knows that if he gets like mauled up or beaten or exiled or whatever, that he cannot help. Like, that's what said it for me. That subtle self-preservation, but also really do want to help you instincts. That's what Lucky is, and that's what thoughtful is. So if there's a third series, most likely Storm gets a mate, and most likely it is thoughtful. Like, that could not have been a coincidence. And Peaceful, she's nice too. She's a character, kind of the same, pretty much the same as like Bella was up until the final battle. Like, they're a good character, never really a major part of anything. Well, in terms of her character, what she actually does, that can be major, but character-wise, nothing ever really major up until the final battle. But, yeah, that would pretty much be what she is. Also, kind of like a more, in terms of what her personality is, instead of just the relevance of the personality, a laid-back sunshine is what is the vibes I got. Like, you're a sunshine who's laid back. And those two would have been very, very interesting. The Wolves as a whole was just, that could be your third series. And also, the names, like the importance of the names has just been thrown out the window. Like, I remember in that, I think it was the third or fourth book, I think, like very beginning, I'm not entirely certain, but Thorn and Beetle get their names, and Lucky gets like a chill when Thorn gets hers. Like, there's something in store for that pup. And his readers were like, something important is going to happen. And in Survivors, something important doesn't mean something important for the world. This time around, the writer was smart enough to know, okay, these dogs aren't going to influence the entire world. We'll have things that are important be important to them and their family. That's kind of the mistakes Seekers made, in that we're going to save the wild. You stop one oil leak from not even a rig, a pipe, and it's like, that's it? Really? But I digress. Survivors has been good about avoiding that by keeping things important to the pack rather than to the world. So when pups are given names that are like, yeah, the pup's going to be important, it's important to the pack. And when Thorn got her name, I was like, she's going to be something important to the pack. Negative or positive, I don't quite know now. Once we started to see her hatred for the lawn paws, I was like, yes, he's going to be a negative force. Important, but negative. And it ends with her getting her legs sawed off, which is important to her. But from the little premonition look he had, she's going to be something important, that's not quite enough. It was major, but it was major to her. The build-up of her character, her importance, it was not carried out as much as it should have been. And speaking of Lucky's premonitions from dreams, his pup's names, Earth, Sky, Forest, River. We knew that was coming, and we knew these pups are important. Now, with the series ending here, we gotta ask, have these pups lived up to their names and been important to the pack, enough so to warrant all 4 being named after spirit dogs? I'd have to say no. Even Sky, who we know more as Tiny, she's good. She's done a good job. But having earned the name Sky, I don't quite think so. And, those pups, they could have earned those names. While they were dealing with the wolf pack issue, that would have been something. Conflicting religions, these being the representatives of that religion, up with that religion, that would have been a big deal, but it wasn't. So these pups, all 4 of which were prophesized basically to be important, not important at all. They're MacGuffins, basically. And having a spirit dog's name does not mean you have to be important. You have to do something important for the pack, one way or the other. Moon, for instance, never really anything important. Great character as per usual, but in terms of being an important dog to the story, of the pack, never really anything. But she was just one dog with the name Moon. These are 4 pups who all chose to be named after spirit dogs. 1, fine, you have that name, whatever. 4, that's gotta mean something. And it didn't mean anything at all. And that is just, there could have been something there, guys. I don't, like I said, that wolf pack thing, that would have been enough. It would have been important to the pack, maybe even important to the spirituality of survivors, which has changed over time, but could have been really important there. We didn't get it. Again, I understand why. I get it. But I will say it is disappointing. And one more little bit of disappointment I want to talk about here of potential lost. It's it's a small thing. I don't think too many people really care about it. Plenty of people didn't even care for it. Fanfics I read, there are quite a few where Mickey and Snap are just yeah, we tried. Goodbye. And I get why. That relationship comes out of nowhere. There's a single sentence in the fourth, the third book, I think, that says, well, Bruno was sitting by Dart. Nothing came of that either, guys. And that Mickey was sitting by Snap. Like, that is the biggest clue we got of, hey, they're going to be mates. And then beginning of the sixth book, we're reading through it, and it's like, where did this come from? When did this start up? Like, we got plenty of insight, like plenty of clues for Lucky and Sweet. We even got something for Arrow and Bella. It made sense there because, yeah, Storm's not going to notice, but when it was Lucky's perspective, how did he not notice Mickey times Snap? How did he not notice them getting together? And it's like, nothing ever really came of Mickey and Snap. Like, at first series, you could see that, yeah, these are pretty similar dogs. They could definitely get together. If they got together with anyone, yeah, Mickey would be going with Snap, Snap would be going with Mickey. After the third book was over, because that was really saying Mickey and Martha, but after that, yeah, Mickey and Snap. And in the second series, you can see, yeah, they have similar ways of thinking, but differing opinions, which is fine. A couple can have that, and they can work it out. And for the first, 2 books, it was shown that, yeah, they're kind of working with that. Third book, it was like, yeah, I guess they're still together. Fourth book, it's like, wait, they were a couple? What? There's just no mentions of that, and I get why it wasn't mentioned much in the fifth book. Storm was kind of gone 90% of the time, but Mickey and Snap, that's a couple that went nowhere. We didn't get, did they drift apart? We don't know. Even in the epilogue, it's like, well, we don't know. We're not going to mention that. Mickey and Snap, who knows how that ended? If they drifted apart, I want to know why they drifted apart. And if they didn't drift apart, well then, what I want to know is, where are the puppies? That's a very, very good question. And now, I'm pretty sure I know why there aren't any puppies. Mickey might have gone to the vet. And, maybe that would have been a little awkward to cover. But the writers already kind of hinted at that in the fifth book of The Gathering Darkness, where it's hey, this one long, when we go to those 2 guys in the woods who definitely not a gay couple, that, the gay couple we asked for, they had a dog, took her to the vet. Apparently she had some scars across her stomach or something. Yeah, that's how they spay the females. That's exactly how that happened. So yeah, they're willing to make that kind of allusion to it. Now, how far they would want to go into all of this, that's questionable, but they could have gone somewhere into it, even just a tiny bit. And it would have been especially nice to know, because this couple has nothing. We know that they're together, but nothing comes of it. Nothing positive, nothing negative. It's do something. Please, do something. I don't even care where they go with it, as long as they had gone somewhere. And the third series, I mentioned, it can be mostly about their interaction with that wolf pack. But they don't really have to go hard into a big overarching theme. The conflict with the wolf pack it can and probably should be the main thing, but it shouldn't just be on the series. Like, the first book, it took us about 3 books to get to where the main story kind of starts, and from there it's just like Storm of Dogs overlying the whole thing, which makes sense, and it worked there. It did. Second series, the main thing is the murderer, and for all 6 books it's like on it, and it's there forever, the whole time, and it works. That story, the murderer one, finding the murderer, taking her down, and all the trips and tumbles and lawn falls along the way, that was done well. It was done very well. But it was hanging over it so much, and it did work even though it was hanging over things so much, that we kind of lost those smaller stories like Mickey and Snap. Interesting, but the murder plot kind of said, no, stay down. And narrator herself, Storm, it makes sense that she wouldn't notice, but it would have been nice for us to notice. And another thing is like, other small things is like the fox den in the territory. Like, that was there for the second book, I believe. And it just, past that one fox coming back, it did nothing. When it could have been more. Not too much more, I don't think it needed to be, but I think it should have been more. Also, the fact that Storm kind of went berserker on them, yeah, that could have been interesting eventually with the one fox that actually kind of likes her, or at least knows she can use her. And the other thing was just the bear. Like, first book, there's a bear. Second book, where's the bear? Third book, where's the bear? Fourth book, was there a bear? Fifth book, yeah, I understand why there's not a bear in that one. Sixth book, still no bear. Epilogue, you're in the mountains, where are the bears? And I get the bear should not have been that important. Like, the last bear, it served its purpose. Whether it's alive or dead, I do not know, but it served its purpose. And it didn't have, the new one did not have to have a major impact either, but something, anything more than just the one-time thing would have been pretty nice to have. So, like, but again, the overarching story, the murder plot, it was good, it was great, I'd say, but it did settle over everything and cover up those small little moments that would have been nice to have. So in the next series, yeah, in the third series that we're almost certainly not getting, yes, the Wolfpack thing would have been the big thing. But it didn't have to control the whole story. It doesn't have to. I mean, like, it could have been there. We could have been more focused on this pack life. We got 6 pups, and only one of them has a personality. Like, that's 5 characters. 5 new characters. 5 new personalities. Like, how's Thorn doing with the one leg that's just like not there no more? Like, how's she doing? Doesn't she still have a hatred? Doesn't Beetle still have a hatred of humans? Like, the epilogue says, oh, Lucky's getting kind of old. Meanwhile, I'm looking at Moon like, how are you holding up, girl? I mean, I know Lucky's getting old over here, but you're like, what, a year or 2 older than him? How you doing? Like, there are a lot of things that could have just been done with the small pack life, like Moon. Dogs that are just not dying of violence or starvation, but just like, we're old. It's time to go. That would have been interesting because Storm, she doesn't know peaceful death. She has never seen good, on my terms, it's my time to go. Well, besides that one wolf, death. And it would have been like, there's a lot of potential for a third series. I get why we're probably not getting one. But all this lost potential is like, oh, you could have done this and that and the wolves and religion and Mickey and Snap and all those pups and like even Arrow. Arrow would have been interesting to see because we can tell that he gets a little bit angry and depressed at the end of this book, and he's got good reason to be. And in the epilogue, we can see that even though a year has passed, which is quite a bit of time, he's still pretty clearly depressed about things. Like, and that makes sense. That's fine for him to be depressed still. It's perfectly understandable, perfectly reasonable. But it would have been nice to see, like, it would have been interesting to see that story. Like, yeah, he's still depressed. He's raising those kids, but he's depressed. Like, Moon, she's gotten back to normal. It didn't take her an excessively long time. Like, she eventually got to a point where, yeah, she's Moon again. Arrow, he's not the Arrow we used to know, and that makes sense. But again, it would have been great to see that. So, like, it's a shame that Survivors had to end with so much potential just sitting there. And it's like, oh, please, one more. But yeah, I get why we're not getting any more. So it sucks that this thing's finally been brought to an end, especially in a way where there's a lot of stuff left to really just, that could have made for an interesting story, but I get it. And I'm really thankful for what we had. Like, it was special. Like, that first book, Seiki, after that, straight to the moon. And if I know everyone knows there's lost potential in this book, and if I missed anything that could have been interesting, like, please tell me, because I'm a writer, more or less, and I'm always wanting to see, like, was there something I missed? Was there a possibility? Was there this? Am I wrong about something? Like, I want to know, I want to see. And this is not the last Survivors video I will make. Like, this is like my what a goodbye to the Survivors series, saying like, oh, you could have been so much more. But yeah, this series has been actually very important to me. Like, I wouldn't say it's been the most important. Seekers is undoubtedly the one that just got me into the world I'm in. But Survivors kept that going very strongly. So, goodbye to this series. It's been a very, very, very fun ride.